The Montana wind carried the scent of sagebrush and distant rain as Thatcher Brennan stepped out of his truck, boots crunching against the gravel. His ranch sprawled across 1,200 acres of rolling hills and dry creek beds, land his grandfather had purchased in 1952 for next to nothing. Now at 43, Thatcher had spent the better part of 2 decades trying to keep the place afloat, fighting droughts, falling cattle prices, and the relentless march of progress that wanted to turn ranches into housing developments. He wasn't out here for sentiment today. The eastern fence line had been down for weeks, and he'd finally carved out time to survey the damage. The September sky hung heavy and grey, promising a storm that would either save his remaining pasture or turn it into a mud pit. Either way, he needed to know what he was dealing with. Thatcher grabbed his wire cutters and climbed through the broken section of fence, noting how the posts had rotted clear through, another expense he couldn't afford. He walked deeper into the property, toward a section he rarely visited, an old box canyon his grandfather had called the Back 40, though it was closer to 60 acres of scrub oak and rocky outcroppings. That's when he saw her. At first, Thatcher thought it was a fallen tree trunk, dark and motionless against the pale dirt. But as he drew closer, his chest tightened. It was a horse, a mare by the looks of her, lying on her side, ribs visible even from a distance. She didn't move as he approached, didn't even lift her head. "Jesus," he muttered, quickening his pace. The mare's coat was matted with dirt and burrs, her mane tangled into thick knots. Her breathing was shallow, laboured. Thatcher knelt beside her, his hand hovering over her neck, feeling the faint warmth beneath the filth. She was alive, but barely. "Easy, girl," he said softly, though she showed no sign of acknowledging him. "I've got you." He pulled out his phone. No signal, of course. Out here, he might as well be on the moon. Thatcher stood, scanning the area for any clue about where she'd come from. No tracks, no signs of other horses. She could have wandered for miles, or she could have been dumped here. Either way, she needed help immediately. Thatcher returned to the mare, running his hands gently along her body, checking for injuries. Her legs were scratched and swollen, her hooves cracked. As he brushed away the caked dirt from her left foreleg, something caught his eye. A mark, dark and deliberate against her hide. He leaned closer, using his sleeve to wipe away more of the grime. It wasn't just a mark. It was a brand, burned into her skin with precision. The symbol was unlike anything he'd seen before, a circle with 3 interlocking crescents inside, and beneath it, a series of numbers. 1847 RC. Thatcher's pulse quickened. Brands told stories. They identified ownership, lineage, heritage, but this one was wrong. The style was old, far older than any modern ranch brand. And the date, 1847. That was before Montana was even a territory. The mare's breathing hitched, pulling him back to the present. He couldn't solve this mystery if she died. Thatcher made his decision quickly. He ran back to his truck, grabbed a tarp and some rope, and returned. It took him nearly an hour to rig a makeshift sled and coax the mare onto it. She barely resisted, too weak to fight. By the time he'd dragged her back to the truck and loaded her into the trailer, calling in every favor he had with his body and sheer determination, the first drops of rain had begun to fall. Thatcher drove faster than he should have on the washboard road, the trailer bouncing behind him, his mind racing with questions he couldn't answer. When he finally pulled into his ranch yard, the storm had arrived in earnest. Thunder rolled across the valley as he backed the trailer up to the barn. His ranch hand, Beckett Cole, emerged from the equipment shed, pulling his jacket over his head. "Boss, what the hell?" Beckett jogged over, his eyes widening as he saw the mare. "Where'd she come from?" "Back 40, found her half dead." Thatcher opened the trailer gate. "Help me get her inside." Together, they guided the mare into an empty stall, laying down fresh straw and filling a water bucket. Beckett, 26, and raised on ranches across Wyoming and Montana, knelt beside her, his experienced hands checking her over. "She's in bad shape," Beckett said quietly. "Dehydrated, malnourished, probably hasn't eaten in days, maybe longer. We need Doc Hartley out here tonight. Already planning on it." Thatcher pulled out his phone now that he had signal. "But look at this first." He showed Beckett the brand. The younger man's brow furrowed as he studied it, his fingers tracing the air above the mark without touching it. "That's old, really old, and I've never seen anything like it." Beckett looked up. "Where do you think she came from?" "I don't know, but someone branded her with a date from 1847, and I want to know why." Beckett stood, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Could be some historical reenactment thing. People get weird about that stuff." "Maybe." But Thatcher didn't believe it. Something about the mare, about the way he'd found her in that specific canyon, felt intentional. "Get her some warm mash. See if she'll eat. I'm calling the vet." As Beckett left, Thatcher crouched beside the mare again. Her eyes were half closed, exhausted. He placed his hand on her neck, feeling the faint, steady beat of her heart. "What's your story, girl?" he whispered. "And why do I feel like finding you wasn't an accident?" The rain hammered against the barn roof, and somewhere in the distance, lightning split the sky. Thatcher stayed with the mare, watching her breathe, staring at that strange brand, and wondering what kind of history he'd just stumbled into. Dr. Rowan Hartley arrived just after 8 p.m., her veterinary truck splashing through the muddy yard. Thatcher met her at the barn door, holding it open against the wind. Rowan was in her late 30s, with sharp green eyes and an efficiency that had earned her the respect of every rancher in the county. "You weren't kidding about the emergency," she said, shaking rain from her jacket. "What have we got?" "Starving mare, severe dehydration, possible exposure. Found her in the back canyon this afternoon." Rowan set her bag down and immediately began her examination, her movements practiced and methodical. She listened to the mare's heart and lungs, checked her gums, examined her hooves. Thatcher and Beckett stood back, giving her room to work. After 15 minutes, Rowan sat back on her heels. "She's in critical condition, but she's a fighter. I'm going to set up an IV, get some fluids and electrolytes into her. We'll start with small amounts of feed. Her system can't handle much right now." She glanced at Thatcher. "Any idea how long she's been out there?" "No, days at least." "She's lucky you found her when you did. Another day, maybe 2, and we wouldn't be having this conversation." Rowan began preparing the IV line. "Any identification? Microchip?" "Just this." Thatcher showed her the brand. Rowan's hands stilled. She leaned closer, her expression shifting from professional detachment to genuine curiosity. "That's unusual. 1847? That can't be right." "That's what I thought. The craftsmanship is incredible. This wasn't done with a modern branding iron." Rowan pulled out her phone and took several photos. "Do you mind if I send these to someone? I have a friend at the University of Montana who specializes in Western history. She might be able to tell us something." "Go ahead." While Rowan worked on the mare, Thatcher pulled Beckett aside. "I want you to ride out to the back 40 tomorrow. See if you can find anything. Tracks, other horses, signs of a camp. Something doesn't add up." Beckett nodded. "You think someone left her there on purpose?" "I think someone wanted her found, or didn't care if she died." Thatcher's jaw tightened. "Either way, I want answers." The mare made it through the night. By morning she was able to lift her head and take small sips of water on her own. Rowan returned at dawn to check on her progress, pleased with the improvement. "She's got spirit," Rowan said, administering another round of fluids. "Give her a week of proper care, and she'll be on her feet." "Any word from your historian friend?" "Actually, yes." Rowan pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages. "Professor Elowen Marsh. She teaches at UM, specializes in pre-statehood Montana. She's very interested in your mare." In fact, she wants to drive down here herself. Thatcher raised an eyebrow. From Missoula, that's 4 hours. She said she'd leave this morning, should be here around noon. Rowan showed him the text thread. Thatcher, she seemed genuinely excited. That brand means something. At 12:47 p.m., a silver SUV pulled into the ranch yard. The woman who emerged was in her early 40s, wearing practical hiking boots and carrying a leather satchel that looked older than Thatcher's barn. Her dark hair was pulled back in a braid, and her eyes held the intense focus of someone who just found a puzzle they couldn't resist. "Professor Marsh," Thatcher greeted her, shaking her hand. "Ilawan, please. Thank you for allowing me to come." She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "May I see her?" Thatcher led her to the barn. The mare was standing now, still weak but alert. Ilawan approached slowly, speaking in low, soothing tones. When she reached the stall, she crouched beside the mare's foreleg, studying the brand with an intensity that made Thatcher uncomfortable. "Remarkable," Ilawan breathed. "Absolutely remarkable." "What is it?" Ilawan stood, her expression grave. This symbol, the circle with 3 crescents, was the mark of the Raven Creek Company. They were a group of fur traders and explorers who operated in this region between 1845 and 1851. Very little is known about them because they kept almost no written records. Most of what we know comes from second-hand accounts and indigenous oral histories. Why would they brand a horse? They wouldn't. Not like this. Ilawan pulled a notebook from her satchel, flipping to a hand-drawn sketch that matched the mare's brand almost exactly. According to tribal accounts, the Raven Creek Company wasn't just trading furs. They were looking for something. Gold, most likely, though some sources suggest it was something else. Land grants, Spanish silver, even artifacts from earlier expeditions. Beckett, who'd been listening from the barn door, stepped forward. "You're saying this horse might be connected to some kind of treasure hunt from the 1800s? "I'm saying this horse carries a symbol that shouldn't exist outside of historical records, and the fact that she was found on your property, Thatcher, is not a coincidence." Thatcher's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" Ilawan met his eyes. "Your land, this entire valley, was part of the Raven Creek Company's territory. In 1851, they vanished. All of them. No bodies were ever found, no explanation given. The only traces left behind were a few scattered campsites and this symbol carved into trees and rocks throughout the region. And you think someone branded this horse with their mark recently? That's what I need to determine." Ilawan photographed the brand from multiple angles. "But if this is authentic, if this brand was made using period-accurate tools and techniques, then someone out there knows more about the Raven Creek Company than any historian alive. And they wanted you to find this horse." The barn fell silent except for the mare's quiet breathing. Thatcher looked at the animal, at the mysterious mark on her leg, and felt the ground shift beneath him. His simple life, his predictable struggles with fences and feed costs, suddenly felt very far away. "What do we do now?" he asked. Ilawan's expression hardened with determination. "We find out who did this, and we discover what they want you to know." Over the next 3 days, Thatcher's ranch became the unlikely center of a historical investigation. Ilawan set up a makeshift office in his dining room, spreading maps and documents across the table. Beckett had ridden out to the back 40 twice, documenting everything he found, which wasn't much. A few old fire rings, some weathered fence posts, and a creek bed that had long since run dry. The mare, whom Thatcher had started calling Raven for lack of a better name, grew stronger each day. Rowan visited daily, monitoring her recovery with professional satisfaction. By the 4th day, Raven was walking around her stall, nickering when Thatcher approached with feed. "She trusts you," Rowan observed, watching as Thatcher stroked the mare's neck. "Horses don't give that easily, especially after trauma. She knows I'm trying to help." Thatcher ran his hand along Raven's flank, feeling the muscles beginning to fill out. I just wish she could tell me where she came from. Maybe she can, in a way. Elowen appeared in the barn doorway, holding a rolled-up map. I need to show you something. They gathered around a hay bale as Elowen unfurled the map, a hand-drawn survey from 1849, yellowed with age and marked with faded ink notations. This is a map created by a surveyor named Augustus Finch. He was hired by the territorial government to document land claims in this region. Elowen pointed to a series of marks along a creek line. These symbols here, see them? Thatcher leaned closer. Small circles with 3 crescents, identical to Raven's brand, dotted the map at irregular intervals. What were they marking? Beckett asked. That's the question I've been trying to answer for 3 years. Elowen traced the line with her finger. Finch's notes mention the Raven Creek Company repeatedly, but always vaguely. He refers to hidden camps and protected caches. My theory is that they were creating a network, supply lines, meeting points, maybe even burial sites for whatever they were transporting. And you think those marks correspond to real locations? I know they do. I've found 4 of them over the last 2 years. Each one was near a natural landmark, a rock formation, a spring, a distinctive tree. Elowen pulled out her phone, showing them photos of weathered symbols carved into stone and wood. The problem is, most of the landmarks have changed or disappeared over 170 years, but this map gives me coordinates, and if I cross-reference them with modern surveys... She looked up at Thatcher. One of those marked locations is on your property, in the exact canyon where you found Raven. The weight of that statement settled over them. Thatcher felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Someone knew that, he said quietly. Someone put that horse there because they wanted me to find her in that specific spot. Exactly. But why now? And who? Before anyone could answer, Thatcher's phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but answered anyway. Brennan. Mr. Brennan, my name is Garrett Sloane. I believe you have something that belongs to me. The voice was smooth, educated, with an undercurrent of barely controlled impatience. Thatcher's grip tightened on the phone. I don't know what you're talking about. The mare, the one you found on your property 4 days ago. She's mine, and I'd like her returned. If she's yours, why was she starving in my canyon? A pause. That was unfortunate. She escaped during transport. I've been searching for her. Then you can file a claim with the county sheriff. Provide proof of ownership, and we'll go from there. Thatcher kept his voice level. Until then, she stays here. Mr. Brennan, I don't think you understand the situation. That horse is valuable, not monetarily, but historically. She's part of a research project, and her disappearance has caused significant setbacks. I'm prepared to compensate you for your trouble, but I need her back. Today. No. Another pause. Longer this time. When Sloane spoke again, his tone had hardened. I'll be in touch. The line went dead. Thatcher looked at Elowen and Beckett, both watching him with concern. Someone wants Raven back, he said, and I don't trust him. Elowen's expression had gone pale. Did he give you his name? Garrett Sloane. She swore under her breath. I know him. He's a private collector. Antiquities, historical artifacts. He's been accused of illegal excavations, theft from protected sites. Nothing ever sticks because he has money and lawyers. She stood abruptly. Thatcher, if Sloane is involved, this is bigger than I thought. He doesn't just collect history, he hoards it, keeps it from researchers, sells to the highest bidder. What does he want with a horse? It's not about the horse. It's about what she represents, what she might lead him to. Elowen began pacing. The Raven Creek Company disappeared with something valuable. If Sloane thinks he can use that brand to find it, he won't stop until he has her. Beckett straightened, his jaw set. Then we make sure he doesn't get her. Thatcher nodded slowly, feeling the situation spiral beyond his control. He'd found a starving horse and wanted to save her. Now he was caught in a conflict over history, money, and secrets buried for nearly 2 centuries. "We need to understand what we're protecting," he said. "Elowen, can you take us to one of those marked sites, the ones you've already found?" "There's one about 20 miles from here, near Devil's Creek. We could go tomorrow." "Then we go. I want to see what's worth fighting for." That night, Thatcher couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Sloane's call, about the way the man had spoken with such certainty. Around 2 a.m., he gave up and walked out to the barn. Raven was awake, her eyes reflecting the lantern light as he approached. "Someone's looking for you," he told her softly. "And I don't know why, but I don't think I can let them have you, not until I know you'll be safe." The mare stepped forward, pressing her muzzle against his chest. In that moment, Thatcher made a decision. Whatever this was, whatever Raven represented, he would see it through. Not for history, not for treasure, but because the horse had trusted him, and he wouldn't betray that trust, even if it cost him everything. They set out at dawn, Thatcher, Elowen, and Beckett in Thatcher's truck, following dirt roads that deteriorated into barely visible trails. The September morning was crisp, the air sharp with the promise of an early winter. Elowen navigated using a combination of her historical maps and a GPS unit, directing them deeper into national forest land that bordered Thatcher's property. "The site is about a mile ahead, but we'll have to hike in," Elowen said, checking her coordinates. The Raven Creek Company chose locations that were defensible and hidden. They didn't want casual travelers stumbling onto their operations. They parked at a washed-out creek crossing and continued on foot. Beckett carried a pack with water and supplies, while Thatcher brought tools, a shovel, a pry bar, anything that might be useful. The terrain grew rougher, climbing through stands of lodgepole pine and over rocky outcroppings. After 40 minutes of steady hiking, Elowen stopped at a clearing where a massive granite boulder thrust up from the earth like a broken tooth. The rock face was scarred with erosion and lichen, but as they circled it, Thatcher saw what they'd come for. Carved into the stone, barely visible under decades of weathering, was the symbol, a circle with 3 interlocking crescents, and below it, numbers. 1847 RC4. "This is Site 4, Elowen said, running her fingers over the carving. "According to Finch's map, there should be a cache nearby. Supplies, documents, something they wanted protected." "How nearby?" "Within 50 yards. The Raven Creek Company used natural landmarks as markers, but the actual caches were deliberately offset to prevent thieves from finding them too easily." They spread out, searching the area methodically. Beckett found an old fire ring, the stones blackened and scattered. Thatcher discovered what looked like the remains of a lean-to shelter, the wood rotted beyond recognition. But it was Elowen who found the anomaly. "Here!" she called out, kneeling beside a cluster of smaller rocks at the base of an oak tree. "This isn't natural placement." Together, they moved the rocks, revealing a depression in the earth. Thatcher used the shovel carefully, aware that anything buried for 170 years would be fragile. 2 feet down, the blade struck something solid. They switched to hand tools, brushing away dirt to reveal a metal box, roughly 2 feet long and a foot wide. The iron was rusted, but intact, sealed with a lock that had long since corroded. Thatcher used the pry bar to lever it open. Inside, wrapped in oiled canvas that had somehow survived, were papers. Elowen lifted them out with trembling hands, her historian's training warring with her excitement. "Ledgers," she whispered, carefully unfolding the first sheet. "Transaction records. Names, dates, quantities." Her eyes scanned the faded ink. They were moving gold, not finding it, moving it, from somewhere in these mountains to trading posts further east. "Stolen gold?" Beckett asked. "I don't think so. The amounts are too precise, too documented. This looks like legitimate transport, but hidden for some reason. Elowen continued reading, then froze. Oh my God. What? She looked up, her face pale. They were working for the federal government. This is dated 1849, just after California struck gold. The U.S. was desperate for hard currency, for ways to finance Western expansion. According to this, the Raven Creek Company was transporting government gold, payment for land treaties, military supplies, territorial administration, through these mountains to avoid bandits and hostile tribes on the main routes. Thatcher felt the implications settle like stones in his stomach. That's why they disappeared. Someone found out what they were carrying, probably killed them for it. Elowen's hands shook as she set down the ledger, and the gold they were transporting was never recovered. It's been lost for 170 years. Until now, Beckett said quietly. Until someone figured out what these symbols meant and started looking. Sloan, Thatcher said. That's why he wants Raven. He's using the brand as a map. Elowen nodded grimly. If he's been systematically searching these sites, he might know more than I do. He might know where the main cache is, where the company was heading when they vanished. Which would be where? I don't know, but I think the answer is on your property, Thatcher. Think about it. You found Raven in that specific canyon, branded with a symbol that's only supposed to exist on historical maps. Someone left her there as a message or a marker or... A crack echoed through the trees. Thatcher's instincts, honed by years of hunting, kicked in immediately. Get down! They dropped behind the boulder as a second shot rang out, striking the oak tree above their heads. Beckett swore, pulling out his phone. No signal. We're too deep. Back to the truck, Thatcher ordered. Stay low. Use the trees for cover. They ran, Elowen clutching the ledger to her chest. More shots followed, but whoever was firing seemed more interested in warning them off than actual killing. The bullets struck wide, kicking up dirt and bark. Still, Thatcher's heart pounded as they crashed through the undergrowth, knowing that a warning could turn lethal at any moment. They reached the truck without further incident, piling in as Thatcher started the engine. He floored it, the truck bouncing violently over the rough trail. Only when they hit paved road did he slow down, checking the rearview mirror. Everyone okay? Elowen nodded, still clutching the ledger. Beckett was on his phone now that they had signal, calling the sheriff's office. This just got serious, Thatcher said. Whoever shot at us doesn't want us finding whatever's out there. Or they already found it, Elowen countered, and they don't want competition. By the time they returned to the ranch, a county sheriff's deputy was waiting. They spent 2 hours giving statements, showing the recovered ledger, explaining the situation. The deputy, a weathered man in his 50s named Morrison, listened with increasing skepticism. So you're telling me someone's hunting for 170-year-old gold, shooting at civilians, and it all connects to a horse with a weird brand? Morrison shook his head. This sounds like something from a movie. We have documentation, Elowen insisted. Historical records, physical evidence. Which I'm sure is fascinating, Professor, but until we have a suspect or an actual crime beyond trespassing and reckless endangerment, there's not much I can do. I'll increase patrols in the area, file a report. Beyond that, he shrugged apologetically. After Morrison left, the three of them sat in Thatcher's kitchen, exhausted and rattled. Raven's soft nickering drifted from the barn, a reminder of how all this had started. We can't just wait for them to come back, Beckett said. We need to figure out what's on your land, boss. Thatcher looked at Elowen. You said one of Finch's marked sites is in my canyon. Can you pinpoint it? With the ledger and the map, yes. It might take me a few days to triangulate, but yes. Then we find it, before Sloan does. 3 days of intensive research followed. Elowen worked 16-hour days, cross-referencing Finch's maps with modern surveys, geological reports, and satellite imagery. She'd set up a dedicated workspace in Thatcher's spare room, the walls covered with printouts and hand-drawn diagrams. Meanwhile, Thatcher and Beckett reinforced security around the ranch. Motion sensors at the gates, cameras at the barn, and most importantly, Raven was never left alone. Thatcher had moved a cot into the barn, sleeping near her stall, his rifle within reach. Sloane called twice more. Each time, Thatcher refused to engage beyond repeating that the matter was with the sheriff. The calls stopped, but that only made him more nervous. Silence from someone like Sloane meant planning, not surrender. On the fourth evening, Elowen emerged from the spare room, her eyes red from exhaustion, but bright with triumph. "I found it." She spread a map across the dining table, Thatcher's property, marked with her annotations. The symbols on Finch's map correspond to natural spring locations. Most of the springs have dried up or shifted, but there's one in your back canyon that's still active, fed by an underground aquifer. Based on the ledger entries and the topography, I believe the main cache, the last place the Raven Creek Company was heading, is within 100 yards of that spring. How do we find it? We look for disturbances in the earth, unusual rock formations, anything that suggests deliberate construction. These caches were designed to last, built into existing geological features. They set out at first light, just the three of them. Thatcher insisted on going in prepared. They carried shovels, pry bars, metal detectors, and enough supplies for a full day. The canyon was a 2-hour ride on horseback, the terrain too rough for vehicles. Raven had recovered enough to make the journey. Thatcher had hesitated to bring her, but Elowen argued she might react to the location, might remember something from before her ordeal. It was a long shot, but they were running out of options. The canyon opened up before them, a natural amphitheater of red rock and scrub pine. The spring Elowen had identified trickled from a crack in the cliff face, creating a small pool before disappearing into the sandy soil. It was beautiful in a harsh way, untouched and timeless. Raven stopped immediately, her ears forward, nostrils flaring. She pulled toward the northern wall of the canyon, where a jumble of boulders created a natural shelter. "She knows something," Beckett said, watching the mare. They followed her lead. Behind the boulders, hidden from casual view, the rock face showed signs of deliberate shaping, tool marks, unnatural angles. Thatcher ran his hands over the stone, feeling for seams. "Here," he said, finding a gap barely wide enough for fingers. "Help me." Together, they worked the pry bar into the gap. The rock resisted, then shifted with a grinding sound. Behind it, darkness. Elowen shone her flashlight into the opening, revealing a narrow passage leading into the cliff. This is it. This is what they were protecting. They entered one at a time, the passage widening after the first few feet into a natural cave. The air was cool and dry, untouched for generations. Thatcher's flashlight beam swept across the space, revealing stacked wooden crates, canvas bags, and along the far wall, a sight that made his breath catch. Gold bars, dozens of them, stamped with federal seals from the 1840s, neatly arranged on stone shelves. Between them, more documents, more records, evidence of a government operation that had been lost to time. "This isn't just a cache," Elowen whispered, her voice echoing. "This is the repository. Everything the Raven Creek Company moved, everything they protected, it's all here." "Worth millions," Beckett said, awestruck. "Worth more than that," Elowen corrected. "The historical value alone is incalculable. This rewrites what we know about territorial expansion, federal finance, westward movement." She moved among the crates, her historian's mind already cataloguing, analyzing. Thatcher barely heard her. He was thinking about Sloane, about the shots in the forest, about what men would do for this kind of discovery. "We need to secure this, document everything, contact the proper authorities." The sound of horses outside cut him off. Thatcher moved to the entrance, peering through the gap. 5 riders, heavily armed, led by a man in his 50s wearing expensive riding gear and a cold smile. Garrett Sloane had found them. "Mr. Brennan," Sloane called out, his voice echoing through the canyon. "I believe we have business to discuss." Thatcher stepped out, positioning himself between Sloane and the cave entrance. Beckett followed, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. They were outnumbered, but they had the defensible position. "This is federal land," Thatcher said evenly. "You're trespassing. Technically, we're on the boundary. Your property ends 50 feet from where you're standing." Sloane dismounted, approaching slowly. "But that's irrelevant. You've found something that belongs to the American people, and I'm here to ensure it's properly recovered. By stealing it. By preserving it. I have the resources, the connections, the expertise to handle this correctly. What do you have? A struggling ranch and a professor with idealistic notions about public ownership?" Sloane's smile didn't reach his eyes. "The government will take this away from you regardless. Eminent domain, historical preservation laws, they'll bury you in paperwork and legal fees. Or you could work with me, receive appropriate compensation, and walk away wealthy." "No, then you're a fool." Sloane nodded to his men. "Secure the site." The riders advanced. Thatcher raised his rifle. Beckett did the same. But before anyone could fire, a new sound filled the canyon. Helicopter blades. A sheriff's helicopter crested the canyon rim, followed immediately by the thrum of multiple vehicles approaching from the access road. Within minutes, the canyon was filled with law enforcement, county sheriffs, federal agents, and, to Thatcher's surprise, uniformed soldiers. Sloane's expression shifted from confidence to fury as an FBI agent approached, badge displayed. "Garrett Sloane, you're under investigation for theft of federal property, illegal excavation, and conspiracy. Step away from the site." As agents surrounded Sloane and his men, another figure approached Thatcher, a woman in her 60s wearing the insignia of the Bureau of Land Management, with the bearing of someone used to authority. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Director Briar Morrison. We've been monitoring Mr. Sloane's activities for 2 years. When Professor Marsh contacted our office about her findings, we coordinated with local law enforcement to set up surveillance. You led us right to what we've been searching for." She looked past him toward the cave. "May I—" Thatcher stepped aside, and Director Morrison entered with Elowen, who was nearly vibrating with excitement and relief. Thatcher turned to Beckett. "How did they know to come today?" Beckett grinned sheepishly. "I called Professor Marsh's university contact line yesterday, told them what we found. Figured it was better to get ahead of this than wait for Sloane to make a move." "You didn't think to mention that? You were focused on the search. I was focused on staying alive." Thatcher couldn't argue with that logic. He watched as federal agents began the careful process of documenting and securing the site, as Sloane was led away in handcuffs, still protesting his rights and his lawyers. Raven stood nearby, calm now, as if her purpose had been fulfilled. Thatcher walked over to her, running his hand along her neck, over the brand that had started everything. Director Morrison emerged from the cave, approaching him with something resembling respect. "Mr. Brennan, what you've found here is extraordinary. The historical significance, the cultural value. This changes our understanding of territorial history. The government will, of course, need to assume control of the site, but you'll be properly compensated, and more importantly, credited. This discovery is yours." "I just found a starving horse," Thatcher said quietly. Everything else was her. Morrison looked at Raven, at the brand, and nodded slowly. "Someone went to great lengths to make sure you found her, to make sure this secret didn't stay buried. Who? We may never know, but I'd guess someone who knew what Sloane was doing, who didn't trust official channels, who needed an honest person to stumble onto the truth." She paused. "You were chosen, Mr. Brennan. And you proved worthy of that trust. The next few weeks were a blur of interviews, paperwork, and media attention. The discovery of the Raven Creek cache made national news, with historians calling it one of the most significant finds in Western American history. Sloan was indicted on multiple charges, his collection of stolen artifacts seized. Elwyn became the lead academic consultant on the site, ensuring proper preservation and study. For Thatcher, life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after stumbling into a 170-year-old mystery. The compensation from the federal government allowed him to repair his fences, upgrade his equipment, and secure his ranch's future. But that wasn't what mattered most. Raven stayed with him. Every attempt to find her original owner had failed. No microchip, no registered brand, no one coming forward to claim her. It was as if she'd appeared specifically for this purpose, then decided to remain. On a cold October morning, Thatcher stood in the barn, brushing Raven's coat until it gleamed. The brand on her leg had become familiar now, a reminder of how a simple act of compassion had led to something far greater. "We make a good team," he told her, offering an apple. "You needed saving, and I needed, well, I guess I needed proof that doing the right thing still matters." Raven crunched the apple contentedly, her dark eyes reflecting trust and contentment. Outside, the Montana wind carried the scent of coming snow. The ranch would face its challenges. The winter would be hard, but for the first time in years, Thatcher felt genuinely hopeful. Some secrets were worth uncovering, some mysteries needed solving, and sometimes a starving horse with a strange brand could lead a man to discover not just hidden gold, but the truth about honor, history, and the value of refusing to walk away from someone in need, even when that someone had 4 legs and couldn't speak. The past had been revealed. The future was uncertain, but in that moment, standing in his barn with a horse who'd carried a secret across time, Thatcher Brennan knew he'd found something more valuable than all the gold in those dark caves. He'd found purpose,